Have you ever experienced a moment so shocking, so impossible to believe, that it completely shatters everything you thought you knew about your past? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Picture this. You're at a simple neighborhood birthday party on a warm Saturday afternoon in rural Arizona. Children are laughing, adults are chatting over cake, and punch, and everything seems perfectly ordinary. Then suddenly, in one heart-stopping moment, you see something that makes your blood run cold, something that shouldn't exist, something that belongs to a nightmare you've been living for 30 long years. This is exactly what happened to Sarah Mitchell, a 55-year-old woman who thought she was just attending another routine community gathering near the Canadian border. Has this ever happened to you? That split second when reality seems to shift. Beneath your feet? Sarah was casually watching the children play when her eyes landed on a young boy, maybe 9 years old, running across the yard. But it wasn't the child himself that made her freeze in terror. It was what he was wearing. Blue, checkered overalls with bright red straps. The exact same distinctive outfit that her 3 missing sons had worn on the day they vanished without a trace 30 years earlier. Not similar, not close, identical, down to every detail, every pattern, every color combination that had been burned into her memory through decades of sleepless nights and endless searching. Stay with me until the end, because what Sarah discovered next would unravel one of the most disturbing missing persons cases you've ever heard. 3 identical triplet boys, just 7 years old, had disappeared from their front yard in 1981 while playing on what seemed like any other afternoon. No witnesses, no screams, no struggle. They simply vanished as if the earth had swallowed them whole, leaving behind devastated parents and a community that would never be the same. For 3 decades, Sarah and her husband David had lived with the unbearable weight of not knowing. Were their sons alive? Were they safe? Had they been taken by strangers? Or had something even more sinister occurred? The police investigation had gone cold within months, leaving the family with nothing but painful memories and the crushing weight of unanswered questions. But seeing those overalls at that birthday party changed everything. Because what you're about to discover might surprise you. Sometimes the most incredible breakthroughs come from the most ordinary moments. Sometimes the truth has been hiding in plain sight all along, waiting for one crucial detail to bring everything into focus. Sarah's hands began to tremble as she stared at the boy. The distinctive clothing wasn't just similar to what her sons had worn. It was as if she was looking at a ghost from her past. Every parent's worst nightmare had become her reality 3 decades ago, and now, somehow, impossibly, she was seeing evidence of that tragic day playing out before her eyes at a neighborhood gathering. What happened next would set in motion a chain of events that would expose a truth so shocking, so carefully hidden, that it would challenge everything the community thought they knew about trust, deception, and the lengths some people will go to satisfy their darkest desires. The simple act of attending a birthday party was about to become the key that would finally unlock a mystery that had haunted an entire town for 30 years. But the story of those blue checkered overalls was just the beginning. Sarah's mind was racing, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. The rational part of her brain was screaming warnings, telling her to stay calm, to think logically. But 30 years of grief and unanswered questions had just collided with what seemed impossible. Without thinking, she found herself walking directly toward the boy, her feet moving as if guided by some force beyond her control. The transformation that overtook Sarah in that moment was something she couldn't have prepared for. Years of therapy, countless sleepless nights, and the gradual acceptance of loss. All of it crumbled away as she reached out and gently touched the child's curly hair. Her voice barely above a whisper, she asked the question that had been burning inside. Her. Where did you get those clothes? The impact of her actions was immediate and devastating. The boy's eyes widened with pure terror. He had no way of understanding the complex emotions driving this stranger's behavior. All he knew was that an unfamiliar woman had approached him and was touching him without permission. His childhood instincts kicked in, and he twisted away from her grasp, running across the yard while crying out for the one person who represented safety in his world. "Daddy! Daddy!" His voice pierced through the casual chatter of the birthday party, high-pitched with fear and confusion. The sound of his distress cut through Sarah like a knife, snapping her back to the present moment and the realization of what she had just done. Marcus, the boy's father, looked up from his conversation with immediate concern. His protective instincts flared as he saw his son running toward him in obvious distress, followed by the gaze of a woman he didn't recognize. The father's mindset shifted instantly from casual social interaction to defensive protection mode. He placed himself between Sarah and his child, his body language making it clear that he would not tolerate any threat to his son's safety. The confrontation that followed revealed the hidden truth about how grief can manifest in ways we never expect. Marcus demanded to know why Sarah had approached his child, his voice carrying the edge of a parent who sensed danger. When she stammered out questions about the overalls, about where they had been purchased, his confusion only deepened. From his perspective, a complete stranger had just grabbed his son and was now interrogating him about clothing purchases. Behind the scenes of this public confrontation, Sarah was experiencing a revelation that would change everything. The defensive father, the frightened child, the curious onlookers, none of them could understand the journey that had led to this moment. They couldn't see the 3 decades of searching, the countless false leads, the gradual erosion of hope that had shaped every decision Sarah had made since that terrible day in 1981. Just when the tension at the birthday party reached its peak, David Mitchell appeared at Sarah's side like a guardian angel. At 57, he had learned to recognize the signs when his wife's grief threatened to overwhelm her rational thinking. The transformation in the crowd was immediate. Neighbors who had been watching the confrontation with growing concern suddenly understood they were witnessing something much deeper than a simple misunderstanding. David's approach to crisis management had been refined over 3 decades of living with unresolved trauma. He wrapped a protective arm around Sarah's shoulders while addressing Marcus with the kind of calm authority that comes from years of explaining the unexplainable. His voice carried the weight of a man who had spent 30 years answering questions about the worst day of his life. "I'm sorry," David said, his steady tone masking the tremor in his hands. "My wife didn't mean any harm. Your son's outfit is very similar to what our boys wore." The revelation that followed hit the gathering like a thunderbolt. Our sons were triplets, Alex, Ben, and Chris. They went missing 30 years ago wearing green checkered overalls just like that, with red straps and long sleeves. The impact of this disclosure rippled through the crowd of neighbors. Mrs. Rodriguez, the party host, stepped forward with the kind of gentle authority that comes from being a community pillar. Her confirmation carried the weight of shared history. It's true. The Mitchell boys disappeared back in 1981. Terrible tragedy. The whole neighborhood searched for weeks. Behind the scenes of this public revelation, something profound was happening in Marcus's mindset. The defensive father's anger dissolved as he realized he wasn't dealing with a dangerous stranger, but with parents living through every parent's worst nightmare. His protective instincts remained, but they were now tempered with compassion and understanding. Sarah's journey through this moment revealed the hidden truth about how hope can survive even the most devastating circumstances. Despite David's gentle restraint, she found herself pleading with Marcus. "Please, could I just look at the clothes? I just want to see if it's the same brand." Her voice carried 3 decades of searching, of following every lead, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. The father's response demonstrated how ordinary decisions can intersect with extraordinary circumstances in ways we never expect. Marcus explained that he had purchased the overalls months earlier at a regular department store, unable to remember the exact date or location. What seemed like a simple clothing purchase to him represented something entirely different to Sarah, a potential clue in a mystery that had consumed her life. David's intervention at this crucial moment showed the delicate balance between supporting his wife's need for answers and protecting her from further emotional harm. His words were gentle but firm. "The boy is not Alex, Ben, or Chris. Let's not upset him further." The decision to step back required tremendous strength, but it demonstrated the wisdom that comes from decades of learning when to pursue hope and when to protect one's heart. The journey home from that birthday party marked a turning point in Sarah's emotional state that David recognized all too well. He had witnessed these moments before, times when the weight of their loss became too much for her to bear in public. His mindset shifted into protective mode as he guided his shaken wife through the 3-block walk to their house, supporting her with the kind of gentle strength that only comes from decades of shared grief. The transformation that occurred once they were safely inside their home revealed the hidden truth about how trauma never truly disappears. It simply waits beneath the surface for the right trigger to bring it flooding back. David helped Sarah to their familiar sofa, the same place where they had comforted each other through countless difficult moments over the past 30 years. The impact of seeing those overalls had shattered the careful emotional barriers she had built to protect herself from exactly this kind of devastating hope. As David prepared tea in their kitchen, the simple ritual providing him with a moment to process what had just happened, Sarah's composure finally crumbled. The tears that had been threatening to fall since she first spotted that little boy came in a torrent of emotion that seemed to pour out 3 decades of accumulated pain. Her voice broke as she spoke the words that revealed the depth of her shame. "I didn't mean to scare that little boy." The revelation of how guilt can compound grief became clear in her next words. When I saw those clothes." She couldn't even finish the sentence, the memory too overwhelming to articulate. Behind the scenes of her public breakdown at the party, Sarah had been fighting a battle between rational thought and desperate hope, between protecting herself from disappointment and allowing herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. David's response demonstrated the kind of understanding that only comes from walking the same difficult journey together. He sat beside her, taking her hand in his, acknowledging what they had both seen. "I was shocked, too, when I saw that boy's clothes. They were so similar. Blue, checkered overalls, red straps, long sleeves." His validation of her reaction provided the comfort she needed to continue processing the experience. The conversation that followed revealed how decisions made in moments of crisis can expose our deepest fears and desires. Sarah's voice carried the weight of years of self-doubt as she whispered, "I feel so embarrassed, always bringing up the past, making everyone uncomfortable." The transformation from hopeful mother to apologetic community member showed how societal pressure can make victims feel guilty for refusing to forget their pain. David's firm response cut through her self-recrimination like a beacon of truth. "We don't have to forget our sons." This simple statement represented a fundamental shift in mindset, the decision to honor their children's memory rather than hide from it. His words carried the impact of a man who had learned that healing doesn't require forgetting, and that love doesn't disappear just because someone is no longer physically present. The transformation in Sarah's demeanor was subtle but significant when she made her next request. Sitting straighter on the sofa, wiping away her tears, she looked at David with a determination that he hadn't seen in years. "I want to see their photos again, David, the ones where they're wearing those clothes." Her decision to confront the past head-on represented a fundamental shift in her mindset, from victim of circumstance to active participant in her own healing journey. David's hesitation was understandable. The memory box had been sealed away in their attic for over 15 years, untouched since the last time grief had overwhelmed their ability to cope with physical reminders of their loss. His response revealed the hidden truth about how protective mechanisms can sometimes become barriers to healing. "They're in the box in the attic. We haven't opened it in over 20 years. The impact of Sarah's plea, "Please, if it will help me calm down," demonstrated how desperation can become a catalyst for breakthrough moments. David's sigh carried the weight of a man who understood that some journeys must be taken, regardless of how painful they might be. His agreement to retrieve the box represented a decision that would change the trajectory of their entire investigation. The sounds from above, David's footsteps overhead, the creak of the attic ladder, created a soundtrack of anticipation that filled the house with tension. Behind the scenes of this simple task, both Sarah and David were preparing themselves emotionally for what they were about to experience. The several minutes of waiting felt like hours, each second stretching with the weight of 30 years of avoided memories. When David returned carrying that dusty cardboard box, the transformation in their living room was immediate. This wasn't just furniture and personal belongings anymore. It had become a sacred space where the past and present would collide. He set the container on their coffee table and wiped away decades of accumulated dust with a nearby hand towel, the simple gesture carrying profound reverence for what lay inside. The revelation that followed as they opened the lid together exposed the careful preservation of love frozen in time. Each item they removed was handled like precious glass. Small toys that still carried the phantom warmth of little hands, baseball gloves worn smooth by countless games of catch, 3 identical stuffed bears that had once provided comfort during childhood nightmares. Every object told a story of interrupted dreams and futures that would never unfold. The homework assignments with their gold stars and smiley faces carried particular emotional weight. These weren't just academic achievements. They were evidence of 3 bright minds that had been developing, learning, growing, creating. The impact of seeing these preserved moments of childhood success was overwhelming, representing not just what was lost, but what could have been. The journey to the bottom of that memory box felt like an archaeological dig through layers of preserved love. David's voice carried a husky emotion as he explained their packing methodology from decades past. The photo album should be at the bottom. We packed it last. This simple statement revealed the hidden truth about how grief organizes itself. The most precious memories are often buried deepest, protected by layers of less emotionally charged items. As they removed the final layer of memorabilia, the leather-bound album appeared like a treasure chest waiting to be opened. The transformation in both Sarah and David was immediate when they saw it. The cover was smooth from years of handling, worn to a soft patina that spoke of countless nights spent reliving happier times before the unthinkable happened. This wasn't just a photo album. It was a portal to a world where their family had been complete. The impact of settling side by side on the sofa to open the album together demonstrated how shared grief can become a bridge between 2 people who have weathered the same storm. The first pages revealed the beginning of their story. 3 identical newborns in the hospital, then 3 toddlers taking their first wobbling steps. Each image chronicled birthday parties where candles were blown out in perfect synchronicity, a visual reminder of the extraordinary bond their sons had shared. Sarah's whispered observation, "They were always so in tune with each other," as she traced a finger over a photo of the boys building a sandcastle at the beach, revealed the depth of connection that had made their disappearance even more devastating. The decision to turn each page slowly became a meditation on what had been lost, each photograph a window into interrupted dreams and futures that would never unfold. Behind the scenes of this emotional excavation, both parents were preparing themselves for what they knew was coming. The photograph they were seeking represented more than just a memory. It was evidence, a final document of their son's existence before everything changed forever. When they finally reached it, the revelation was both beautiful and heartbreaking. There they were, Alex, Ben, and Chris, standing in front of their house, wearing those distinctive blue checkered overalls with red straps over long-sleeved shirts. Their broad smiles radiated the kind of pure joy that only children possess, arms wrapped around each other's shoulders in a display of brotherhood that seemed to transcend the physical world. The transformation this image created in the room was palpable. Suddenly, their living room was filled with the ghost of childhood laughter. David's voice broke slightly as he provided the context that made this photograph so crucial. This was taken the morning they disappeared, exactly 1 hour before they were gone. The impact of this timing turned what should have been a cherished family memory into something far more significant, the last visual record of 3 innocent lives before they vanished into a mystery that would consume 3 decades. As they sat studying the photograph with the intensity of detectives examining evidence, Sarah and David began to process what they had seen at the birthday party through a more analytical lens. The transformation from emotional parents to methodical investigators represented a crucial shift in their mindset. Grief was giving way to something more productive. systematic observation, and logical reasoning. David leaned closer to the image, his voice taking on a measured tone as he began to compare details. Look closely at the overalls in our photo versus what we saw today. The boy at the party. His clothes were similar but different. The revelation that followed demonstrated how memory, when combined with visual evidence, can reveal hidden truths that might otherwise be overlooked. The impact of this detailed analysis became clear as they identified specific differences. The shade of green in their son's vintage overalls appeared more muted, weathered by time and countless wash cycles, while the modern version they had seen at the party displayed the crisp, vibrant color of recently manufactured clothing. The checkered pattern itself told a story, thinner lines in the contemporary version versus the bolder, more pronounced squares that characterize the early 1980s design aesthetic. Behind the scenes of this careful examination, both parents were experiencing a complex mix of relief and disappointment. The decision to acknowledge these differences required them to let go of the immediate hope that had driven Sarah's dramatic reaction at the party. Yet this analytical approach was opening a different kind of doorway, one that led toward actual evidence rather than wishful thinking. The journey of discovery was far from over. As David poured himself another cup of tea, Sarah's attention remained fixed on the photograph with laser-like focus. Sometimes the most significant revelations come not from what we're actively searching for, but from details that exist in our peripheral vision, waiting for the right moment to demand our attention. That moment arrived when Sarah suddenly poked David's arm with such urgency that he almost spilled his drink. "David, look at the background," she said, her voice carrying an electric charge of excitement and dread. "Isn't that the Cadillac that Alex was such a big fan of?" The transformation in her tone indicated that she had spotted something that could change everything they thought they knew about that tragic day. David set down his teapot and peered more closely at the photograph. There, partially visible at the edge of the frame, was the unmistakable front section of a Burgundy Cadillac parked across the street from their home. The impact of this discovery was immediate and profound. Memories came flooding back with startling clarity. Alex had indeed been obsessed with cars, especially that particular vehicle, and all three boys used to beg for the chance to look inside whenever they encountered it in their neighborhood. The revelation that followed exposed a hidden truth that had been lurking in this family photograph for 30 years. "That's Mr. Richard Thompson's Cadillac," Sarah said, her voice growing more intense with each word. Richard had been their son's elementary school teacher, a man beloved by children and respected throughout their close-knit community. Everyone knew about that distinctive car because he rarely drove it, treating it as his most cherished possession rather than everyday transportation. The memories that came flooding back about Richard Thompson painted a picture of a man who had been deeply woven into the fabric of their community. The transformation in Sarah's voice as she recalled those details revealed just how significant this teacher had been in their sons' lives. "We were such a tight community back then," she murmured, her tone carrying both nostalgia and growing unease. "Everyone knew each other, and Mr. Richard was such a kind man. The children adored him." David nodded in agreement, his own memories surfacing as they discussed their son's fascination with that distinctive vehicle. Alex's obsession with cars had been legendary among their friends and neighbors, but that Burgundy Cadillac had held special significance. The impact of seeing it parked in their neighborhood was always electric for the boys. They would rush to the windows, begging for permission to go outside and admire it up close. Richard had been gracious about their interest, sometimes even lifting them up so they could peer through the windows at the pristine interior. Behind the scenes of these fond recollections, however, a darker realization was beginning to take shape. Sarah's mindset shifted as she processed the timeline implications of what they were seeing in the photograph. Her brow furrowed with concentration as she began to piece together a puzzle that didn't quite fit. "David, are you absolutely sure this image was taken on the day they disappeared?" "Yes, I'm certain," David replied without hesitation. "This was taken the morning of their disappearance. They vanished in the afternoon." His confidence in this fact was unwavering. Some details of that terrible day were burned into his memory with crystalline clarity. The revelation that followed would expose a hidden truth that had been lurking in plain sight for 3 decades. "But that's strange," Sarah insisted, her voice growing more intense with each word. "Mr. Richard had moved to a different town by then. Remember how sad all the parents were when he switched schools? The kids loved him so much we threw him a farewell party at the school, the day before he left." The transformation in the room's atmosphere was immediate and unsettling. David frowned deeply as he tried to reconcile these conflicting pieces of information. The decision to trust their memories versus what they were seeing in the photograph created a cognitive dissonance that neither of them could easily resolve. "I'm certain this was taken the morning of their disappearance," he repeated, but now his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Sarah's next words carried the impact of a detective uncovering a crucial piece of evidence. "But Mr. Richard had supposedly moved from town a week before the boys disappeared, so how could his Cadillac be parked there in the photo?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything they thought they knew about that tragic day. The journey toward truth was revealing itself to be far more complex than either of them had imagined. If Richard Thompson had truly left their community before their sons vanished, then his car shouldn't have been anywhere near their neighborhood on that fateful morning. The transformation in David's mindset was immediate, as Sarah's question about the timeline inconsistency settled into his consciousness. He couldn't simply dismiss what they were seeing, but he also couldn't ignore the concrete evidence that might resolve this contradiction. With the determination of a man seeking absolute truth, David set the photo album aside and began rummaging through the memory box again, searching through items they had already removed. The journey through their preserved belongings took on new urgency as David hunted for one specific piece of evidence that would either validate or destroy their emerging theory. Behind the scenes of this frantic search, both parents understood that they were standing at a crossroads between accepting a disturbing possibility and maintaining their faith in what they thought they knew about that tragic day. Finally, David found what he was looking for: the original film processing envelope, a small piece of evidence that had been waiting 30 years to provide crucial testimony. The yellowed envelope still contained the film negatives, but more importantly, it bore the official processing date stamped clearly on the outside by the photo development company. His voice carried a mix of relief and growing concern as he showed Sarah the evidence. "Look, this confirms it. The film was developed 2 days after they disappeared. These were definitely taken that morning." The impact of this confirmation was both reassuring and deeply troubling. On one hand, it validated David's unwavering certainty about when the photograph had been taken. On the other hand, it made the presence of Richard Thompson's Cadillac in the background an undeniable fact that demanded explanation. The hidden truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Either their memories about Richard's departure were wrong, or something far more sinister had occurred. Sarah rubbed her arms as a sudden chill seemed to fill the room despite the warm Arizona air. The revelation that was taking shape challenged everything their close-knit community had believed about trust, timing, and the events surrounding their son's disappearance. "If that was really Mr. Richard's car," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "then he might have seen something suspicious in the neighborhood that day. The police would have questioned him." The hue transformation in her reasoning revealed how a mother's protective instincts could shift from hope to suspicion when presented with evidence that didn't align with accepted facts. The decision to continue pursuing this line of thinking required courage, because it meant questioning the integrity of a man who had been beloved by children and respected by an entire community. David's attempt to provide rational explanation demonstrated his own internal struggle with what they were uncovering. "It could be a coincidence," he suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "It might not even be Mr. Richard's Cadillac. It could have belonged to anyone." But even as he spoke these words, they both knew how weak this theory sounded in light of what they remembered about their neighborhood dynamics. The journey toward truth was revealing uncomfortable possibilities that neither of them wanted to confront. If Richard Thompson had truly been gone before their sons disappeared, then the police investigation should have reflected that fact. The absence of any mention of questioning their beloved teacher now seemed like a glaring oversight rather than simple thoroughness. The revelation about potential police oversight began to consume Sarah's thoughts as she processed the implications of what they had discovered. Her transformation from grieving mother to amateur detective was becoming more pronounced with each passing moment. The impact of realizing that such a crucial piece of evidence might have been overlooked for 3 decades created a sense of urgency that was difficult to contain. "If the police examined all our family photos, including this one," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with conviction, "they would have noticed Richard's Cadillac and questioned him about it. The fact that they never mentioned interviewing him means they must have truly believed he was gone before the boys disappeared." The hidden truth behind this observation was deeply unsettling. Either the investigation had been incomplete, or someone had deliberately misled authorities about Richard's whereabouts. David's attempt to provide alternative explanations revealed his own internal struggle with what they were uncovering. "Maybe the license plate wasn't clear enough in the photo," he suggested, though his tone suggested he was grasping for rational explanations that might preserve their faith in the original investigation. Behind the scenes of this conversation, both parents were wrestling with the possibility that a respected community figure might have been involved in their son's disappearance. The transformation in Sarah's mindset was evident as she took a deep breath and seemed to accept David's gentle reasoning. "You're right," she said finally, though her voice carried the weight of someone who wasn't entirely convinced. "It's probably nothing." This decision to step back from her suspicions represented a crucial moment in her journey. The choice between pursuing potentially dangerous theories and protecting herself from further disappointment. David's relief was palpable as he closed the photo album and began helping Sarah return their son's belongings to the memory box. Each item was carefully placed back into its protective storage, but the photograph remained outside the container. Sarah had removed it, wanting to keep this particular piece of evidence close at hand. The sudden transformation in David's demeanor caught Sarah off guard when he glanced at the ornate clock on their mantel and jumped to his feet with obvious alarm. "Good Lord, I completely lost track of time," he exclaimed, his voice carrying the panic of someone who had just realized a significant oversight. "I have my checkup appointment today at 11:50, and it's already 11:30. It's Saturday, and the clinic only opens until 1 Cruz." The impact of this revelation shifted the entire atmosphere in their living room from investigative tension to domestic urgency. Sarah looked up from the photo album with surprise, suddenly remembering her role as supportive wife alongside her identity as determined investigator. "I totally forgot to remind you. Dr. Matthews doesn't like it when patients are late." The journey from emotional discovery to practical reality demonstrated how even the most profound revelations must sometimes yield to the demands of everyday life. Within 5 minutes, Sarah was helping David gather his essential items: health, insurance card, medication list, and the journal where he recorded his blood pressure readings. David's departure left Sarah alone with her thoughts and the photograph that seemed to hold secrets she was only beginning to understand. The transformation in the house's atmosphere was immediate. Without David's protective presence, her investigative instincts could emerge more freely. She went to their bedroom and picked up her phone from the nightstand, intending to simply rest as she had promised, but fate had different plans. The text message waiting for her came from Helen Garcia, an old friend who had worked at the school board for nearly 3 decades before retiring. The timing felt almost supernatural in its perfect alignment with Sarah's growing need for answers. "Annual school district retiree reunion coming up next month. Hope to see you and David there. We miss you both." The impact of this simple message was immediate. Helen would have known Richard Thompson professionally and might possess information that could resolve the troubling timeline discrepancy. Behind the scenes of this moment, Sarah's mindset was undergoing a crucial shift from passive victim to active investigator. The decision to pursue this lead represented a fundamental transformation in how she approached her son's disappearance. Instead of waiting for answers to come to her, she was choosing to seek them out, regardless of what uncomfortable truths they might reveal. The journey from doubt to determination took only moments as Sarah processed the opportunity that had just presented itself. Helen's decades of experience within the school system meant she would have access to records, memories, and institutional knowledge that ordinary community members wouldn't possess. If anyone could provide clarity about Richard's true departure date and destination, it would be someone with Helen's background and connections. Sarah's fingers moved almost without conscious thought as she tapped Helen's contact information and placed the call. The transformation in her voice was remarkable as she shifted into casual conversation mode, masking her true intentions beneath the veneer of friendly reconnection. "Helen, what a wonderful surprise. Did you get my text about the reunion?" The conversation that followed demonstrated the hidden truth about how information gathering requires careful balance between genuine interest and strategic questioning. They spent several minutes catching up, exchanging news about mutual friends, and sharing updates about their health and families. Sarah's patience during this preliminary phase revealed her understanding that rushing toward her real objective would only create suspicion and potentially close off the information source she desperately needed. The revelation she was seeking required delicate handling, so when Sarah finally steered the conversation toward her true purpose, her approach was masterful in its apparent casualness. "Helen, do you remember Mr. Richard Thompson? He taught at Oak Ridge Elementary back in the early 80s. The impact of this seemingly innocent question would soon expose information that had been hidden for 3 decades. Helen's immediate recognition confirmed that Sarah had chosen the right person to contact. "Richard? Of course I remember him. Such a talented teacher. The children and parents adored him." But what came next would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew about: their beloved educator's departure from their community. Sarah's question about Richard's current whereabouts seemed innocent enough, but Helen's response would shatter everything she thought she knew about their beloved teacher's departure. "Do you know where he is now?" Sarah asked, trying to maintain the casual tone while her heart began to race with anticipation. "I remember he moved out of town, but I can't recall exactly where he went." The transformation in Helen's voice suggested she was accessing memories that required careful consideration. There was a pause on the line that felt like an eternity before Helen delivered information that would change Sarah's entire understanding of the past. "Actually, Sarah, I think you've got it wrong. Richard never continued teaching, at least not in the public school system. He never filed any transfer papers to another district or state." The impact of this revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her transformation from casual inquirer to stunned investigator was immediate and profound. The hidden truth behind their community farewell party was beginning to emerge, exposing a carefully constructed deception that had fooled everyone, including the police who had investigated her son's disappearance. "He didn't," Sarah managed to say, her voice barely steady. "But we had a farewell party for him. He told everyone he was moving to teach at another school." The journey toward understanding was revealing itself to be far more complex and disturbing than she had ever imagined. Behind the scenes of that touching community goodbye, Richard Thompson had been weaving a web of lies that would allow him to disappear without proper scrutiny. Helen's explanation continued to unravel the official story they had all believed for 3 decades. "No, nothing like that. Maybe he was just joking when he said that. You know how he was. From what I've heard, he moved to a remote area in Arizona and started a private charity farm for immigrant children." The transformation in Sarah's understanding was seismic. Their respected teacher hadn't transferred to continue his educational mission elsewhere, but had instead created an isolated operation away from oversight and accountability. The revelation about the nature of Richard's post-teaching endeavor carried disturbing implications that Sarah was only beginning to process. "A farm?" she repeated, her voice tight with growing alarm. The decision to leave public education and work with vulnerable immigrant children in a remote location suggested a calculated plan rather than a spontaneous career change. Helen's memory provided the final piece of this particular puzzle. "Someone mentioned the name of his place to me a few months ago. Let me think." The silence that followed was pregnant with anticipation as Sarah waited for information that would give her a concrete target for her investigation. "Ah, I remember now. It's called Thompson's Haven for Hope." The impact of having an actual name and location transformed Sarah's theoretical suspicions into actionable intelligence. Thompson's Haven for Hope. The facility name itself carried an ironic weight that made her stomach churn. Behind the scenes of this supposedly charitable operation What kind of hope was Richard Thompson actually providing to vulnerable children? The journey from beloved community educator to operator of an isolated farm for immigrant children represented a troubling evolution that raised questions about motivation, oversight, and the true nature of Richard's interest in working with young people. After ending the call with Helen, the transformation in Sarah's approach to investigation became immediately apparent. She went straight to the computer in their small home office, her fingers moving with the determination of someone who had finally found a concrete lead to pursue. The impact of having an actual facility name gave her investigation direction and purpose that had been missing for 3 decades. The journey into cyberspace revealed Thompson's haven for hope through a simple website that appeared professionally designed but contained minimal information. The homepage banner displayed images that seemed designed to project positivity and hope: smiling young men and boys working on a farm, most appearing to be of Hispanic or Mexican heritage with dark hair and tanned skin. Behind the scenes of these carefully curated images, Sarah found herself studying each face, looking for anything that might trigger recognition or concern. As she browsed through the gallery photos, the hidden truth about her own expectations became clear. Part of her had been hoping to find something obviously suspicious or disturbing, evidence that would validate her growing suspicions about Richard Thompson. Instead, the images portrayed what appeared to be a genuinely positive, nurturing environment where immigrant youth were learning valuable agricultural skills and receiving educational support. The transformation in her mindset as she absorbed this information revealed the complex nature of her investigation. Richard's profile page featured a brief biography mentioning his background as an elementary teacher and his passion for working with children. The farm's mission statement emphasized education, support, and creating pathways to success for immigrant youth, all admirable goals that made her suspicions seem paranoid and unfounded. Yet the decision to dig deeper had already been made. Sarah found the farm's address and contact information, noting that while there was an email address, no phone number was provided. The facility's location struck her as significant, only 90 minutes away from their home, close enough for a day trip but remote enough to operate without casual scrutiny. The journey from online research to concrete action plan happened rapidly as Sarah checked the time and realized David would still be at his medical appointment. Her transformation from cautious investigator to determined action taker reflected a fundamental shift in her approach to seeking answers. Instead of waiting and wondering, she was choosing to confront the questions that had been haunting her since discovering that photograph. The impact of her next decision would set events in motion that neither she nor David could have anticipated. Sarah picked up her phone and called David at the clinic, her voice carrying a new sense of urgency and purpose. "David, how's your appointment going?" she asked when he answered from the waiting room. His response that he was still waiting provided her with the opening she needed to share what she had discovered. The revelation about Helen's information and the existence of Thompson's haven for hope poured out of her in a rush of excitement and nervous energy. "I'd like to go there today, David. Would you come with me?" The transformation in their afternoon plans happened with surprising ease, once David understood the significance of what Sarah had uncovered. Despite his initial concerns about her fixation on the Cadillac coincidence, his agreement to visit the farm represented a crucial turning point in their shared journey toward truth. The transformation of their Saturday afternoon from medical routine to investigative mission began as soon as Sarah arrived at the clinic. David emerged from Dr. Matthews's office with the relieved expression of someone who had received good news about his health, but his demeanor shifted immediately when he saw the determined look in his wife's eyes. The impact of her discoveries during his absence had clearly energized her in a way he hadn't seen in years. Within minutes, they were in David's sedan, following GPS directions that would take them deeper into Arizona's rural landscape than they had ventured in decades. The journey toward Thompson's haven for hope became a meditation on how much their lives had changed since their son's disappearance. The suburban neighborhoods gradually gave way to increasingly remote farmland, each mile taking them further from the safety of familiar surroundings and closer to confronting uncomfortable truths. Behind the scenes of this drive, both Sarah and David were processing the magnitude of what they were attempting. The decision to make an unannounced visit to their former teacher's facility represented a fundamental shift in their approach to seeking answers. Instead of waiting for closure to come to them, they were actively pursuing it, regardless of what they might discover. The transformation in the landscape around them seemed to mirror their own internal journey from passive grief to active investigation. Rolling hills gave way to flat agricultural expanses, where irrigation systems created geometric patterns across fields of crops they couldn't identify. The remoteness of the area struck both of them as significant. This was exactly the kind of isolated location where someone could operate without unwanted scrutiny or unexpected visitors. As they approached their destination, an unexpected interruption provided additional context for what they were about to encounter. Sarah had just pulled a colorful flyer from her purse, something a young woman in a straw hat and bright yellow t-shirt had thrust into her hand as she disembarked from the bus at the clinic. The revelation of what the flyer advertised created an interesting coincidence that neither of them could ignore. "County Agricultural Fair this week," Sarah read aloud, studying the details as David navigated the increasingly narrow country roads. The impact of this discovery became clear as she continued reading. Each day features different activities, culminating in a farmer's market and various competitions over the weekend. But what caught her attention most was the large print announcing a special auction scheduled for that very day. The journey toward understanding took another, unexpected turn when Sarah realized the auction site's location. "David, look at this," she said, holding up the flyer so he could glance at it safely while driving. "There's an auction happening today at a site not far from Richard's farm." The transformation in their mission became apparent. They weren't just visiting an isolated facility anymore, but potentially walking into an active community event. Behind the scenes of this revelation, both parents understood that the presence of a county fair and auction in the area might work to their advantage. If Richard and his staff were participating in local agricultural events, it could provide them with an opportunity to observe him in a public setting before making direct contact. The decision to proceed with their original plan while keeping the agricultural event in mind demonstrated their growing sophistication as amateur investigators. After driving for more than an hour through increasingly remote countryside, they finally turned onto a long gravel road marked by a simple wooden sign that read, "Thompson's Haven for Hope." The transformation in their surroundings was immediate and striking. They had truly entered an isolated world where the rules of their suburban existence no longer applied. The driveway led to a cluster of buildings that appeared both welcoming and oddly isolated. A large farmhouse, several barns, and what looked like dormitory-style structures. The impact of actually arriving at their destination hit both Sarah and David simultaneously. This wasn't just research anymore or theoretical investigation. They were physically present at the facility where their former teacher had been working with children for 3 decades. Behind the scenes of their nervous anticipation, both parents were wrestling with the magnitude of what they were attempting and the potential consequences of their amateur detective work. The place seemed unusually quiet, with few people visible as they parked and stepped out of their car. The transformation in the atmosphere was almost immediate when a young man emerged from one of the barns, approaching them with the kind of friendly smile that suggested visitors were both welcome and somewhat unusual. The journey from uncertainty to cautious optimism began when he spoke with the warm accent that confirmed Helen's description of the facility's mission. "Hello, can I help you?" the young man asked, and David took the lead in their carefully rehearsed introduction. "We're looking for Richard Thompson. Is this his farm?" The revelation that followed provided both relief and disappointment in equal measure. "Yes, this is Mr. Thompson's place," Miguel confirmed, "but he isn't here right now. He and most of our staff and children went to the county agricultural event. There's an auction today, and we're also running a stall to promote our charity program." The decision to continue their investigation despite Richard's absence revealed the hidden truth about their determination. When David asked if they could look around the farm to see what Richard had built, the transformation in Miguel's response demonstrated the open, transparent approach that characterized the facility's operations. After a brief phone conversation with the supervisor, he returned with permission to provide them with a tour. The journey through Thompson's Haven for Hope over the next 30 minutes challenged many of Sarah's preconceptions about what they might find. Miguel's explanations of their charity program revealed a seemingly genuine operation dedicated to helping immigrant children learn agriculture while providing education and support. The impact of seeing the livestock barns, horse stables, and crop fields was profound. This appeared to be exactly what it claimed to be: a working farm dedicated to positive youth development. Behind the scenes of this guided tour, both Sarah and David found themselves reassessing their suspicions. The facility's obvious dedication to agricultural education and youth empowerment made their dark theories about Richard Thompson seem increasingly paranoid and unfounded. Miguel's pride in describing the program's achievements was infectious, and his genuine enthusiasm for the work being done challenged their investigative mindset. Miguel's tour reached its most significant moment when they approached a colorful structure that stood apart from the more utilitarian farm buildings. "This is one of our special barns," he explained with obvious pride, gesturing toward the exterior that had been transformed into a canvas of children's artwork. The transformation of this simple agricultural building into a vibrant, creative space spoke to the care and attention that had been invested in making the facility welcoming for young minds. The impact of stepping inside this dedicated children's area was immediate and profound. The space had been thoughtfully designed with low tables, bright lighting, and walls covered, in an explosion of colorful artwork that spoke to years of creative expression and learning. Behind the scenes of this carefully orchestrated environment, Sarah found herself reassessing her suspicions about Richard Thompson's true motivations for working with children. Their introduction to Antonio marked a crucial turning point in their investigation, though neither Sarah nor David realized it immediately. The man arranging materials on several tables appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s, with thick black curly hair and fair skin that created an interesting contrast with most of the other staff they had encountered. The transformation in the room's energy was immediate when he looked up and smiled at their entrance. There was something about his expression that seemed both familiar and unsettling. "Antonio, these are friends of Mr. Thompson," Miguel explained as the activities coordinator wiped his hands on a towel and approached them with practiced friendliness. The revelation that followed during their introduction provided crucial context for understanding Antonio's role within the facility's structure. "I'm preparing some demonstration activities for potential investors and clients who will be visiting during the event this week," he explained, moving around the tables with an ease that spoke of years of experience in this role. The journey into Antonio's personal history revealed information that should have been reassuring, but instead triggered deeper questions about the nature of Richard Thompson's rescue operations. "I've been here a very long time, since I was 8 years old, actually," Antonio shared with obvious gratitude. "Mr. Richard rescued me and took me in when I had nowhere else to go." The transformation in Sarah's understanding was subtle but significant. This wasn't just a charity farm, but a place where Richard had been collecting vulnerable children for decades. The decision to examine the children's artwork more closely led Sarah to a discovery that would challenge everything she thought she knew about coincidence and connection. Her gaze landed on a drawing that seemed to leap from the wall with shocking familiarity. A red Cadillac meticulously decorated with colorful grains of rice glued to the paper. The impact of recognizing the subject matter created a physical reaction that she struggled to conceal from their hosts. Behind the scenes of this moment, Sarah's investigative instincts were screaming warnings while her rational mind tried to dismiss what seemed like an impossible coincidence. The hidden truth about her emotional state became clear when she pointed to the drawing and managed to keep her voice steady. "That Cadillac, I remember that car. It was Mr. Richard's treasure." Antonio's response provided confirmation that sent chills through both parents, though they worked hard to maintain their casual demeanor. "Yes, he still has it here, in fact. He took it out this morning," Antonio said with obvious pride in his artistic creation. The transformation in Sarah's perception of Antonio happened gradually, like pieces of a puzzle slowly clicking into place in her subconscious mind. As she watched him move around the activity tables, explaining the creative processes he used with the children, something about his mannerisms triggered a deep, almost primal recognition. The impact of observing his thick black curly hair catch the light, the way his wide smile dominated his features, and particularly his animated hand gestures, created an unsettling sense of déjà vu that she couldn't shake. Behind the scenes of this growing awareness, Sarah's investigative mindset was battling with her protective maternal instincts. The hidden truth about what she was feeling remained too dangerous to acknowledge, even to herself. Yet the journey toward recognition was becoming impossible to ignore, as Antonio continued to demonstrate his work with obvious passion and skill. The decision to study him more intently revealed details that made her heart race with a mixture of hope and terror. When Antonio gestured enthusiastically while explaining how children learn to create textured artwork using natural materials, Sarah found herself transported back 30 years to countless moments watching Alex express himself with identical animated enthusiasm. The transformation in her emotional state was so profound that David noticed her intense staring and placed a subtle, warning hand on her back. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Antonio asked, his genuine concern evident as he noticed Sarah's focused attention. The revelation of his caring nature only intensified her internal conflict. This young man displayed the kind of empathy and gentleness that she remembered in her missing son. But how could such an impossible coincidence exist? The impact of her next decision would forever change the trajectory of their investigation. Despite David's gentle cautioning, presence, and her own rational mind screaming warnings about inappropriate behavior, Sarah found herself asking the question that had been burning inside her since the moment she first saw Antonio. "Do you have any siblings?" The transformation in Antonio's demeanor was immediate and telling. His somewhat awkward chuckle suggested that personal questions from visitors were unusual, but his response would provide the crucial piece of information that Sarah had been unconsciously seeking. "Yes, I do, actually," he said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "My brother's at the event today, with Mr. Richard." Behind the scenes of this seemingly innocent exchange, Sarah's mind was racing through possibilities that she barely dared to consider. The journey from suspicious observation to direct questioning represented a fundamental shift in her approach. She was no longer just investigating Richard Thompson, but actively pursuing evidence that might connect to her missing sons. The revelation about Antonio having a brother created new questions that demanded answers. If her growing suspicions about Antonio's identity had any merit, then the presence of a sibling raised even more disturbing possibilities about the scope of Richard Thompson's activities over the past 3 decades. The decision to continue their tour while processing this information demonstrated both Sarah and David's growing sophistication as amateur investigators, but also their increasing emotional investment in outcomes that could shatter their carefully constructed acceptance of loss. The journey to the county fairgrounds felt charged with anticipation and dread, as Sarah and David processed what they had discovered at Thompson's Haven for Hope. The transformation in their mindset was complete. They were no longer casual visitors making friendly inquiries, but determined investigators following a trail of evidence that seemed to point toward an unthinkable truth about their former teacher's true nature. The impact of arriving at the agricultural event was immediately apparent in the stark contrast between the isolated farm and this bustling community gathering. Colorful tents and booths lined the perimeter of a large field, with farm equipment displays creating an impressive centerpiece. The atmosphere was festive and family-friendly, filled with farmers, ranchers, and local families enjoying the weekend festivities. Behind the scenes of this innocent celebration, Sarah and David knew they were about to confront someone who might hold the key to 30 years of unanswered questions. The decision to locate Richard's booth required methodical searching through the maze of vendors and exhibits. After about 10 minutes of systematic exploration, they spotted the white tent with its distinctive blue banner stretching across the top, Thompson's Haven for Hope. The transformation in Sarah's emotional state was immediate and profound when she saw the familiar figure speaking earnestly with a well-dressed couple who appeared to be potential donors. The revelation of seeing Richard Thompson after 3 decades hit both parents with unexpected force. Though his hair had gone completely white and deep lines etched his weathered face, his characteristic enthusiastic gesturing remained unchanged. The impact of this recognition transported them back to countless parent-teacher conferences and school events where this same man had discussed their son's progress with genuine warmth and professional concern. The journey from distant observation to direct confrontation required courage that both Sarah and David had to summon from deep within themselves. They waited until the potential donors moved on, then approached with the careful deliberation of people who understood the magnitude of what they were attempting. The hidden truth about their nervousness was evident in the way they coordinated their approach, David taking the lead as Sarah steeled herself for a conversation that could change everything. "Mr. Thompson," David said, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. The transformation in Richard's expression was immediate, polite but blank, the look of someone trying to place faces from a distant past. "Yes, can I help you?" he responded with the practiced courtesy of someone accustomed to dealing with strangers at public events. Sarah stepped closer, her voice barely steady as she made the introduction that would either validate or destroy their growing suspicions. "You probably don't remember us. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and this is my husband David. Our sons Alex, Ben, and Chris were your students at Oak Ridge Elementary." The impact of hearing those names seemed to create a subtle shift in Richard's demeanor, though his brow remained furrowed as he studied their faces with obvious effort. Behind the scenes of this moment, both parents were acutely aware that they were about to test whether their beloved former teacher had any connection to the most traumatic event of their lives. The transformation in their conversation's dynamic occurred when Sarah made the decision that would either validate or destroy their investigation. Without answering Richard's polite small talk about his farm operations, she reached into her purse and produced the photograph that had started this entire journey. The impact of this moment was electric. She held out the image with the kind of deliberate intensity that suggested this wasn't just a casual sharing of memories. "I was looking at this photo just this morning," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years of searching. "It was taken the day the boys disappeared, just an hour before, actually." The revelation of the photograph's significance created an immediate shift in Richard's demeanor that both parents noticed instantly. Behind the scenes of his carefully maintained public persona, something darker seemed to surface as he stared at the image. The journey, from friendly recognition to obvious discomfort, was swift and telling. Sarah pointed to the edge of the frame where the burgundy Cadillac was partially visible, her fingers steady despite the tremor in her voice. "I noticed the Cadillac in the background. Was that your car, Mr. Thompson? Do you remember driving in our neighborhood or parking near our home that day?" The transformation in Richard's expression was dramatic and unmistakable. The affable smile that had characterized their reunion disappeared, replaced by a tight-lipped seriousness that spoke of someone calculating responses rather than simply remembering. His reaction revealed the hidden truth about his discomfort with direct questioning. This wasn't the confused recollection of an elderly man, but the careful deflection of someone with something to hide. "I can't remember exactly when I left town," Richard finally said, his voice noticeably lower and more controlled than before. "And I certainly don't recall driving near your home or seeing the boys that day." The impact of his denial was profound, particularly given the confident way he handed the photograph back to Sarah, as if dismissing evidence that clearly contradicted his claims. The decision to continue observing Richard and his staff would soon provide them with the breakthrough they needed. As they moved through the fairgrounds, Sarah's trained eye spotted movement that made her heart race with recognition. Two men were working efficiently around. Various booths and their physical appearance created an immediate connection to what they had observed at the farm. "David," Sarah whispered urgently, pointing discreetly toward the men, "look at those two. Don't they look exactly like Antonio?" The revelation of seeing not just one, but multiple young men with identical features to the activity's coordinator created a pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Behind the scenes of this discovery, both parents understood they were witnessing something that validated their most unthinkable suspicions. When they approached an elderly staff member who was packing materials at a nearby table, his casual confirmation provided the final piece of evidence they needed. Yes, they're triplets. Antonio, Diego, and Marco. They've all been with Mr. Thompson since they were children. The transformation in Sarah and David's understanding was complete and devastating. Three men, the right age with identical features, all rescued. As children, by the same teacher whose car had been parked near their home on the day their sons vanished. The transformation from suspicious parents to active participants in a criminal investigation happened in a matter of moments as Sarah made the most crucial decision of their 30-year journey. Her hands trembled as she dialed emergency services, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was reporting. "This is going to sound incredible," she began when connected to Detective Rodriguez from the Missing Persons Unit. "But my husband and I believe we've found our sons who disappeared 30 years ago." The impact of making that call set in motion a series of events that would expose one of the most disturbing cases of child abduction and manipulation the county had ever seen. Behind the scenes of the festive agricultural fair, law enforcement was mobilizing with the kind of precision that comes from decades of training in handling sensitive missing persons cases. Detective Rodriguez's calm but firm instructions were clear: maintain a safe distance and avoid confronting Richard Thompson directly. The journey from discovery to justice moved with startling speed as multiple sheriff's vehicles converged on the fairgrounds. The transformation in the atmosphere was immediate when Sarah and David spotted Richard, Antonio, and Diego moving quickly toward the parking area, their behavior suddenly urgent and purposeful. The hidden truth about Richard's awareness of their investigation became apparent. Somehow, he had realized that his carefully constructed 30-year deception was unraveling. The revelation of law enforcement's swift response demonstrated just how seriously the authorities took their claims. Within minutes, sheriff's deputies had positioned their vehicles to block Richard's exit, their professional approach reflecting years of experience in handling potentially dangerous suspects. The decision to surround the vehicle, rather than pursue a high-speed chase, showed the kind of tactical thinking that prioritizes everyone's safety. Behind the scenes of Richard's arrest, the most profound transformation was occurring within Antonio and Diego themselves. When Sarah approached the group of officers and held up the 1981 photograph, pointing to the three identical boys in blue checkered overalls, the recognition in the young men's eyes was immediate and devastating. "That's us," Antonio said softly, his voice carrying the weight of someone whose entire understanding of reality was collapsing. The impact of DNA testing and Richard's eventual confession revealed the scope of psychological manipulation that had sustained this deception for 3 decades. The journey toward healing would be long and complex, but the moment when Sarah, David, Alex, Ben, and Chris finally embraced in that small-town police station represented the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The transformation from missing children to found adults brought its own challenges. 30 years of false memories, manipulated identity, and psychological conditioning would require careful therapeutic intervention. Yet, the fundamental truth remained unchanged. Love had survived 3 decades of separation, and a family that had been torn apart by one man's twisted obsession was finally complete. The story of Sarah and David Mitchell reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary breakthroughs come from the simplest moments. A photograph glimpsed at the right time, a conversation with an old friend, the courage to follow instincts that others might dismiss as wishful thinking. Their 30-year journey from devastating loss to miraculous reunion shows us that hope, when combined with determination and a willingness to ask difficult questions, can illuminate truths that have been hidden in plain sight. What strikes me most about this incredible case is how many small details had to align perfectly for this family to find their way back to each other. The blue checkered overalls at a birthday party, the Cadillac barely visible in a photograph's background, even that chance text message about a school reunion. Each element played a crucial role in unraveling a deception that had lasted 3 decades. If this story has taught us anything, it's that the most important mysteries in our lives often require us to look beyond the obvious, to question what we think we know, and to trust that persistent love can overcome even the most carefully constructed lies. The Mitchell family's journey proves that some bonds truly are unbreakable, no matter how much time passes or how many obstacles stand in the way. Stories like this one are exactly why I'm passionate about sharing these incredible real-life mysteries with you. If you found value in following Sarah and David's remarkable journey alongside me today, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. These are the kinds of stories that deserve to be told, and having you as part of our community means we can continue exploring the most fascinating cases together. If you've made it all the way to this moment with me, drop a comment saying, "Hope never dies." I read every single one, and it means everything to know you've invested your time in these incredible human stories. And if this journey has moved you the way it moved me, that like button lets me know we've created something meaningful together. There's a video right here that complements this topic perfectly. Another family's search for truth that will show you just how powerful persistence can be when everything seems impossible. Click and continue with me over there.